Oh, hey everybody. Welcome to the Multi-Voice Entertainment. I am the Multi-Voice Reviewer. I have many voices, but one opinion. And today I'm going to be reviewing a comic book. But first, a little history. I'm going to be reviewing a comic book that is based on my favorite board game of all time. And it is the murder mystery game called Clue. And it was created by this one guy who goes by the name of Anthony Pratt. When Anthony Pratt created that board game, he wanted, ever since the 40s, 30s, and 40s, role-playing murder mystery was a big thing at the time. And since not many people are rich enough to do some role-playing murder mystery thing, so Anthony Pratt decided to create a murder mystery game where you can choose the suspects and it's up to you to figure out who killed Mr. Body, where, and with what. And believe it or not, it was this movie, it got me in to Clue. Back in 1985, same year I was born, Paramount made this movie called Clue, the movie. Now, I don't know if it's going to be on Paramount Plus or not, but who knows. But you have Tim Curry playing the butler, and you have the late but lovely Madeline Kahn as Mrs. White, and of course Mrs. Peacock and Miss Scarlet. And of course you have Christopher Lloyd as Professor Plum, but he played Professor Plum before he played Doc on Back to the Future. Great Scott, I'm a suspect! And you have Colonel Mustard and Mr. Green in this. It's a really good murder mystery comedy, and one thing I like the most is all three different endings in one movie. I like that more than just having one of the endings one at a time. And of course, you cannot replace Tim Curry playing the butler in this. But all of a sudden, I heard that one of our favorite actors who played Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds, he's going to get himself involved in a Clue reboot. Everybody's been talking about doing a reboot of the Clue movie. And of course, Deadpool director Tim Hill is going to be directing. And I also heard that Jason Bateman is going to be starring in it as well. But of course, there is this company who goes by the name of IDW, who decided to do this, a murder mystery comic book series of Clue. Now, I got this as a gift from my mom, who got it who found it on eBay. Now, one thing I gotta say about this comic book, that it's not glued in right. It's some of the pages are falling apart. I need some glue for it and such. So, I'm trying to make it as short as I can, but explain the whole story in this comic. So, let's dig in the Clue comic book graphic novel and see how does Clue go in this review. Now, from the beginning, you have a roll call of suspects. You have a butler who goes by the name of Upton, not to be confused with Kate Upton. You have Miss Scarlet, Mr. Green, Dr. Orchid, and of course Detective Ulcher, Professor Plum, Detective Amarillo, Detective Amarillo, Colonel Mustard, Mrs. Peacock, and instead of Mrs. White, they made her Senator White. So Mrs. White's a senator? Now let's begin. And of course, you do have Mr. Body here. Now, from the beginning, you start noticing that the butler, Upton, he starts breaking the fourth wall. So, unlike Deadpool, Upton, the butler, is breaking the fourth wall and telling us what's going on. And of course, the usual suspects, he invites them all in this huge house. And I see that they made Miss Scarlet be an Australian pop star. That's another change. And of course, Mr. Buddy invited him into a dinner party. And they all offered them some food and a lot of fooling around, lollygagging, until all of a sudden, they found Mr. Body's body. He is dead, and it looks like he got shot in the chest. And all of a sudden, they found Mrs. Peacock with the revolver. So it's going to be Mrs. Peacock in the library with the revolver? But of course, there's this whole goose chase, and that's when the two detectives shows up. And they're trying to cross through the bridge that's fallen apart. And they finally interrogated Mrs. Peacock, but they hold her until further notice, and that's when they decided to do some flashbacks that Upton, the butler, hates. He hates them doing flashbacks, so he kind of argues with the editor, and he says, you better roll with it. So he roll with it. So a lot of conversation going, and then all of a sudden, Mrs. Peacock is murdered. Bum, bum, bum! To be continued, indeed. Now the detective starts investigating the entire house. Mr. Green starts creeping the crap out of Senator White, while Miss Scarlet keeps trying to practicing her singing, while Colonel Mustard is staring at a portrait of a certain plant in his past. And of course, there's a camera flashback about Professor Plum, where Professor Peter Plum didn't go outside with the kids. He studied more on books and becoming a professor and a scientist. And then all of a sudden, the detectives found a book that pretty much turns out to be a secret passageway. And it turns out it has a lot of notes, a lot of files, a lot of boxes, and a picture of a flower. So now, Upton was ordered from the detectives to put them in their rooms until further notice. And of course, there's a lot of bickering on the suspects and interrogation from the cops, until Senator White decided to block her door because she doesn't trust anybody. And then all of a sudden, Detective Umbridge gets hit in the head with a lead pipe in the study. So who hit Detective Umbridge? Umbridge? Sometimes I can't keep track of the other characters and their names. But of course, Dr. Orchid helps Professor Plum escape until they're in the flower garden. The other detective was shocked to see that her partner is murdered, and she's trying to find the suspects, while the rest of the suspects are all minding their own business in their own rooms. And then the flashback in Afghanistan 10 years ago, involving Colonel Mustard. Now Upton is getting so peed off that he decided to argue with the editor again. But of course the editor says, we have to do it again, another flashback to explain the story. So he was like, pish posh, but he has to do it. So Colonel Mustard went to the garden where the same flower that he saw the picture of, called a miracle. And of course there's some soldiers attacking some of the troops. And Colonel Mustard gets blamed during the war, and all the flowers were picked and gathered. So now the garden is full of those miracle flowers. And of course, Plum and Orchid start arguing and start eyeing each other until that one detective starts tailing after them, so they keep on running. While Miss Scarlet and Mr. Green, they got themselves in a bit of a feud. And of course, Mr. Green knocked into Senator White's room and showed her the flowers. So she's suspicious about something. While at the same time, Upton, the butler, prepared dinner, and he walked into Mr. Body's body, but it turns out Mr. Body faked his death. He was never shot. Imagine that. Now, while at the same time, Mr. Green, Senator White, and Miss Scarlet starts trying to figure out what's going on here, what's all the suspicions and the murders and everything. And then another damn flashback where it turns out that Senator White, there was a military court going on here and talking about Colonel Mustard's, what he was doing during Afghanistan. And of course, Senator White blamed him for the death of his troops. So they have him, give him an dishonorable discharge. Colonel Mustard, he decided to make himself a weapon, a little bit of a scalpel, while Senator White found a wrench. Now, of course, they both found each other in the flower bed and playing a little cat and mouse against one another, until all of a sudden, they both killed each other. Now, Professor Plum and Dr. Orchid start figuring things out with mustard and ketchup, writing everything on the ground with mustard and ketchup, trying to figure out all the evidence and all the clues. And of course, that one detective who survived found their body. And of course, a flashback, another damn flashback, where Mr. Body met Miss Scarlet, the pop star. And all of a sudden, that one detective heard a scream going on when she was outside the mansion. So she ran in. Her and Upton found Miss Scarlet looked like she was pushed out of the rail and landed on the ground to her death. And Mr. Green kept saying he was innocent because the rail looked like they were sawed, and all of a sudden snapped when Miss Scarlet leaned into it. So now the detective decided to handcuff Mr. Green. But he keeps yelling, "I'm innocent, I didn't kill her!" Meanwhile, Plum and Orchid found Mr. Body. And of course, Upton, as usual, there's another flashback going on, and Upton is really pissed about it. So he's arguing with the editor again. And it's supposed to be a deal between Senator White and Miss Scarlet to prove that Colonel Mustard was involved. And of course, how it really happened, Miss Scarlet was planning on hanging herself with a rope by tying it on the edge so she can jump, but Mr. Green shows up, telling Mr. Green to stay away, and that's when the rail snapped and she fell to her death, and that's what really happened to Miss Scarlet. Man, they're killing each other. And of course, it turns out that Senator White, she had killed that other detective, the one who got murdered with the lead pipe. So was Mrs. White in the study with the lead pipe. And she was finding all the documents involving her and trying to get them all burned, trying to destroy evidence. So now, pretty much, Professor Plum and Dr. Orchid figured out that Mr. Body is none other than Dr. Black. And he was playing this whole game the entire time. Those trusty friends that he invited were turns out to be guilty parties. So anyway, detective took Mr. Green with her to her car as they drove off, while everybody starts suspecting the evidence. And of course, it turns out that Dr. Black, aka Mr. Body, he knew Dr. Orchid's family, and they both died from experimental accident. So now he decided to raise Dr. Orchid as his own daughter. And he sees a lot of potential in Professor Plum and wants her to help him out with his experiments. And that's how it all happened. And it turns out that it was Dr. Orchid who killed Mrs. Peacock with a candlestick. Always candlesticks, you know. Meanwhile, detective was driving away with Mr. Green, and Mr. Green kind of figured out something until all of a sudden Mr. Green starts feeling sick. So the detective pulled over, but turns out that he died from puking his guts out. Wind blew the door open. Anyway, he died from puking his guts out because Dr. Orchid put some poisons on Mr. Green's food, and that's how he died. So now Upton, the butler, is pissed about the editor, so he battled against the editor, grabbed his computer cord, wrapped it around the neck, and pushed him out the window. And of course, he found another editor behind the story, and just cut him with a knife. Found another art designer, and stab him in the eye with a pen. And then Upton says, "No more suspects." I said, "No more suspects!" And then it went to black. And that was it at the end of Clue, the comic. This comic has a lot of plot, has a lot of twists in it, but it is a really good story. So I recommend you guys find this comic book and read it yourself. It's really good. You won't be disappointed. I think it's a really awesome story. But of course, another thing I also discovered, that this wasn't the only comic book I noticed. Long time ago, when they did they were doing some commercials, there was a comic book short of Cluedo, the commercial comic short of Cluedo. And of course, they did a sequel. There was Clue Candlestick. And of course, one thing I did enjoy is the Clue the FMV PC game. But of course, there's more games if you have a CDI. As for me, there was... Now, I have this game here. I have Clue VCR game. Now, my opinion to this game is it's really entertaining. Sadly, I don't have a VHS, but I can watch it on YouTube. But I like to have it on DVD. But one thing I gotta say about this game, it's a lot more fun to watch than it is to play. And also, they even made VCR murder mystery game Clue Part 2, Murder in Disguise. And of course, now I got this one. Turns out that Parker Brothers, the original company who owns it, decided to make their own ripoff called Mystery the Game. Who would have thought their own company decided to rip themselves off? But of course, one thing I did enjoy Clue DVD game, where you can play it on the television with a DVD player. I have a Blu-ray player, so that counts. And one thing I do enjoy more is I like the suspenseful twists on the Clue miniseries from the Hub. And of course, there was the Cluedo TV series from Season 1 all the way to Season 4, and then they made a Christmas special. And of course, there's even one in Australia, Germany, and that other country I can't pronounce. Puerto Rico? I think. Anyway. But to me, if you notice, I collect Clue board games, because ever since the movie, I like to collect Clue board games, different types. And the one I like to have in my collection, there are two. I like to get the Clue 1949 edition, and also the golden luxurious deluxe version of Clue. Oh, one more thing I also forgot to mention. My audio drama of Cluedo. I know I did the trailer of that audio drama of Cluedo years ago, and I had a hard time trying to find enough people to do the voice, and of course some of the lines had to be renewed. Took me a long time for them to do it, but now I finally got all the lines and everything together, so as soon as I'm done with my Halloween special of Phantom vs. Dracula and the Opera, I might be able to finish off my Clue audio episode and probably work on the series soon. I mean, to me, I love Clue, and I collect Clue games or anything's Clue related, and that's what I do love. So, if you like this review so far about me and Clue, please leave a comment down below, hit like and subscribe for more. And I'm the Multi-Voice Reviewer. I remember so I can jog your memory.